In the quiet town of Breinberg lived a humble man named Stanley. He was an ordinary citizen, going about his daily business and leading a quiet life. But one cold autumn day, Stanley decided to pick mushrooms and berries in the woods that surrounded his hometown. Stanley went into the woods with a basket and a knife, full of expectation of a little adventure and fresh air. He listened for every rustle, warily looking around. The woods were beautiful, but there was something wrong with them that day. Stanley noticed that the clouds were moving faster than usual, and the sunlight was streaming through the branches of the trees, creating plays of shadows on the ground. He sensed a growing unease, but he didn't know what it was exactly. But Stanley wasn't going to back down. He decided to explore the forest and find out what was going on. As he moved deeper into the forest, Stanley noticed more and more strange phenomena. The trees seemed distorted and unnatural, their branches folded into strange shapes, as if they were trying to convey some kind of message. There was a peculiar smell in the air, sweet and penetrating. But the strangest thing was that Stanley could hear ghostly whispers coming from deep within the forest. Stanley was not a believer in the supernatural, but he could not deny that on this day the forest concealed some mystery. He decided to listen to his intuition and continue his exploration, hoping to find answers to his questions. With each step, Stanley plunged deeper and deeper into the depths of the forest, moving farther and farther away from the illuminated paths. His gaze drifted around, trying to discern something incomprehensible or unusual. The forest was engulfed in silence, broken only by the rustling under Stanley's feet and the singing of birds. The clock on his wrist showed that several hours had passed, but Stanley paid it no mind. Time here, deep in the woods, seemed distorted, as if it flowed according to its own rules. Stanley was in a world of his own thoughts, focused on his mission. Suddenly, in the silence of the forest, Stanley noticed something strange. In the distance, among the trees, a shadow flashed. He listened, but there was no sound. His heart beat faster, and he decided to go towards where he had seen the shadow. As he approached, he noticed that it was a man. The traveler stood motionless, as if petrified, as if sensing Stanley's presence. Approaching even closer, Stanley could see the stranger's facial features. He was dressed in old-fashioned clothes that looked like a bygone era. But what was most striking was that the stranger's face showed no signs of aging. It was smooth and young, as if time had not touched it. Stanley paused in indecision. What kind of man stood before him? How had he come to be here? Questions swirled in his mind, but one thing was clear. Something incredible and mysterious was going on in the woods. Stanley approached the stranger, feeling the growing excitement. They exchanged a quick glance, as if they knew that their meeting in the woods was no accident. The stranger spoke first, his voice soft, but a little sad. "Hello, my friend. You must be surprised to see me here," the stranger said. Stanley nodded, trying to find the words. "Yes, it is strange indeed. I didn't expect to meet anyone in this part of the woods. Who are you?" "My name is Larry," the stranger replied. "I am an unusual person because my time has stopped. I entered this forest 20 years ago, and for me only a few hours have passed. But for the rest of the people, 2 decades have passed, and they buried me long ago." Stanley shuddered. It was completely unfathomable. Larry looked young, as if time had passed him by. He was living proof that something supernatural was going on in the woods. "How can that be?" asked Stanley, hardly believing his eyes. Larry smiled sadly. "I don't know the exact answer myself. When I entered this forest, I suspected nothing. But as I explored its depths, I sensed that something unusual was happening. The forest took me into its arms, and I found myself in this paranormal zone where time is distorted. I'm not aging, but everyone else is." Stanley looked at Larry with mixed feelings of wonder and fear. He couldn't imagine what it would be like to be trapped in such a mystical reality where everyone he knew was turning to dust. "What now?" asked Stanley. Larry sighed. "I don't know. I've been looking for answers all these years, but they elude me. Maybe you'll find what I'm so desperately searching for. Help me solve this riddle and free me from the captivity of the forest." Stanley nodded in agreement. His heart raced harder at the thought that he might be the key to solving this mystery. They moved deeper into the forest, carrying with them the hope of redemption and deliverance. There was one forest where people rarely dared to set foot. It was said that strange powers reigned there, and that its dark trees whispered mysteriously to one another. People spoke of lost wayfarers who never returned. These stories flooded our minds and enlivened our imaginations. One day I decided to investigate. I don't know what came into my head, but I decided I wanted to find out what was really going on there. As I ventured into the forest, I felt my heart begin to beat harder. The tree trunks loomed over me like eerie, shadowy figures, ready to wrap their branches around me. I listened for every rustle, every creak that came from beneath my feet. My imagination amplified the sounds, and I began to see shadows gliding among the trees. My imagination was playing tricks on me, and I began to doubt my decision. But something inside me told me that I had to go on. I was stubborn and determined. As I walked on, I began to notice that time began to flow differently. The sun had already set, but night had not come. The forest was in a strange, half-dark atmosphere, as if time had stopped here. I felt that I was not alone in this forest. The eyes of an invisible observer penetrated through the green dams of the trees, and I could feel the cold breath of the forest touching my skin. My footsteps fell silent in the deep silence, and I realized that I had become part of this bleak world. Finally, I found myself in the hearth of nature, surrounded by dense trees. I looked around in wonder and awe. It was a place where time was broken, where normal rules did not apply, and I was alone in the midst of this anomaly. My nerves began to crack, and I knew it was time to leave. I ran backward, making my way through the thickets and the closed branches. The forest seemed impenetrable and dangerous, but I wasn't going to give up. I wanted to get out of this world where time was distorted and shadows hid unknowable horrors. When I finally emerged from the forest, I felt a mixture of fear and relief. I realized that the story had stayed with me forever. The forest seemed impenetrable, its dark and dense thickets as if hiding some mystery that could not be solved. Even so, I wasn't going to just walk away. Something told me that the answers to my questions were here, in this dark and mysterious place. I listened to every rustle, every sound, trying to catch any hint of what lurked in these depths. Time warped and disappeared, and I felt trapped. The past and the present mingled into one. My feet continued to lead me forward despite my doubts and fears. Every step was difficult, every breath filled with an air of mystery. The forest surrounded me on all sides, like a living organism ready to swallow me whole. And then, at last, I discovered something strange. There was a faint glimmer of light in the thicket. My heart raced, and I decided to move closer to see what it was. As I got closer, the light grew brighter and brighter, and I felt it pull me toward me. When I finally reached that point, I found a small expanse among the trees. The half-lit circle was illuminated by light, and in its center stood an old, abandoned house. I sensed that this place had some significance, that here lay the truth I was seeking. Cautiously entering the house, I found it empty and abandoned. But in the darkness, I could see footprints, as if someone had been here recently. Suddenly, I heard rustling behind me and turned around. In the dark passage, I could make out the silhouette of a man. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" I asked, but the man was silent. He only slowly raised his hand and pointed to an old table. I stepped closer and found dusty photographs on the table. These photographs opened my eyes to a terrible truth. I realized that those I thought were buried in the past were in fact still alive and lurking in the shadows of this forest. And now they know I am here. My heart was pounding frantically in my chest, and fear was engulfing every cell of my body. I knew I couldn't stay here a minute longer. With tingling in my legs and tired muscles, I darted away from the damn place. The leaves crackled beneath my feet, and the branches slapped me sharply in the face. I didn't look back, but I could feel the dark shadows following me, ready to penetrate my soul and consume me whole. The minutes felt like hours, and each step deep into the forest increased my despair. I was running, and I didn't know where I was going. My only goal was to get away from this paranormal zone, where time was distorted and turned into a trap. Finally, I reached the edge of the forest. A wide plain opened before me, shrouded in mist. I was relieved, but at the same time a sharp pain pierced my heart. Time had stopped here, and I had lost years of my life. The people I knew had long ago buried me in their memories and went on with their lives, unaware of my existence. With heavy thoughts and a broken soul, I walked out into the clearing. As I looked back, I remembered the dark forest that had become my dark abode. I realized that my encounter with that place had changed me forever. I was now a lonely wanderer, wandering between two worlds, the real and the paranormal. My story did not end here. I must go forward, despite the weight of the past and the mysteries that remain unanswered. With each step, I will search for the truth and try to unravel the mysteries that lie in the depths of this mystical place. Such was the conclusion of my first journey into the spooky forest. I hope this story was a warning to you and opened your eyes to what is hidden in the world around us. Be careful never to get lost in the forest, where time loses its meaning and entities from other dimensions are waiting to get even with the living.